Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and today's video has been a long time in the making. Today I get to try out my newly built level 50 VIRIZION in the Master League. As you may have seen, my Ultra League VIRIZION is currently a shiny 15-15-14 IV, and with it coming back into raids, I was able to get the XL candies I need to power it all the way up to level 50. At level 50, it only gets to about 3400 CP, so it's definitely going to be tough to use, but I think it's intriguing, as it's one of the only Pokemon in the Master League that can beat both DIALGA and KYOGRE. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out level 50 VIRIZION in the Open Master League. Picking up a tough lead in the first match, Smackdown Tyranitar into Dialga. I save switch into Genesect, and my opponent has the perfect hard counter available as in comes Ho-Oh. These double super effective Incinerates absolutely shredding Genesect. I'm not able to make it to a second Techno Blast, so I'm only able to make it to the double resisted X-Scissor. Ho-Oh does not have to shield a thing, they get the full farm down, and they leave with 100 energy. But the good news is Ho-Oh's standard moveset is walled by the Tyranitar. I am actually running the legacy move of Smackdown now on the Tyranitar, specifically for better coverage going up against Ho-Oh. Back in comes the Dialga. With a small energy lead, I'm able to make it to the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing connects, in comes VIRIZION, and it's a simultaneous switch, VIRIZION into KYOGRE. We baited out the worst counter to VIRIZION, being the Ho-Oh, and now VIRIZION is locked in against the core that it can destroy. VIRIZION firing off another Leaf Blade. That is going to get the KO onto KYOGRE. In comes Dialga. Dialga has no hope remaining in this match. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. Moving into the next match, leading Shadow Tyranitar into Xerneas. This matchup right here is another reason why I did invest the Elite TM and give the Tyranitar Smackdown. As long as Tyranitar has 2 shields, this is a surprisingly okay matchup versus both the Xerneas and the Zacian. My plan here is just to go for the 2 shield farm down. I can exit the matchup with 100 energy, and that should be very threatening to whatever they have in the back. I shield up the close combat, I get the farm down, I have 100 energy, in comes KYOGRE, and I'm going to save switch into Genesect. This is not a fantastic matchup for the Genesect, especially down 2 shields, but I'm just checking to see if they have a fire type like Ho-Oh in the back. They're staying in, so it looks like they do not. They're firing off the Surf. I'm hoping that I can survive this on 1 HP, but the Surf just barely is enough to KO. I'm going to fully wait the switch timer, and now it's time for VIRIZION. In comes VIRIZION in the back. Opponent has Dialga, and we have the exact perfect Pokemon in the back to core break my opponent. VIRIZION going to be able to hit for super effective damage with the Sacred Sword. Opponent will commit the shield. I'm going for Sacred Sword number 2, and then I can switch into the Tyranitar as I have back-to-back moves loaded. With the Dragon Breath that they just snuck through, they now have the Iron Head, so if they throw right here, it is going to be a CMP tie, which my opponent is going to win, but honestly, that's okay by me, because I can use this as an opportunity to get a bunch of farm on VIRIZION. I farm up to the back-to-back moves, I go for a Leaf Blade in case my opponent switches and tries to catch onto the KYOGRE. They don't, but Leaf Blade is still enough to KO, and I have the Leaf Blade loaded, and this should be game over. Leaf Blade into KYOGRE. Oh no, KYOGRE lives on 1 HP. Can VIRIZION take a move? It's the Surf. Yes, it can, and against all odds, we take that win. Great lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Giratina. My opponent is going to save switch into Dialga, and I get to respond with VIRIZION. However, I've already made a mistake in this game. I threw a Smackdown with the Tyranitar before switching, and if you give Dialga enough of an energy head start, they can actually CMP tie here the Draco Meteor to the second Sacred Sword, and that Draco Meteor does get the KO. So a definite misplay by me. At the start, I should have just expected them to switch out, not thrown the Smackdown, then I could have brought in the VIRIZION instantly and outpaced. Whereas now, I don't have switch advantage. I try and go for the Fury Cutter farm down, but the Dialga on 1 HP makes it to the double debuff Draco Meteor, and now this is going to be tough. I'm farming up, I'm firing off this Techno Blast, and Techno Blast is going to be able to pick up the knockout here. My opponent lets it through in the back. It's the Pokemon that I can't see. It's Groudon, and this is so bad. Groudon hits this entire team for either single or double super effective damage. My only hope is that my opponent baits. I call it. It's the Fire Punch bait. That's step 1. I continue to farm up with the Tyranitar, and I'm going for the Brutal Swing. Oh my goodness, that bait call was massive, but it still might not be enough to save me. I think I have to call it again. Thinking about it, letting it go. It's another Fire Punch. All the opponent had to do was Precipice Blades and they could have won the game, but now I have too many shields. They're forced to just spam out Fire Punches, and I am very close to making it to a Brutal Swing. Is Brutal Swing going to be enough to KO here? Brutal Swing is a pretty nice charge move, but Groudon has a lot of bulk. Firing off the Brutal Swing into the Groudon. Can Groudon hang on? Yes, it will. One smackdown from the Tyranitar, and we win a game we had no business winning. Back to bad leads for Tyranitar in the next match as I lead into Dialga. I save switch into Genesect. My opponent stays in, so I'm just going straight for the Techno Blast. Techno Blast will be shielded opponent. Now I'm going to send in Kyogre. So far, my opponent has the exact core that I'm trying to destroy with Virizion, but I don't have the alignment that I'm looking for. X-Scissor will connect. My opponent can successfully no-shield both of these X-Scissors if they want to. Now this is going to get the Kyogre low, but not low enough to get the KO. Kyogre leaves with 9 waterfalls. I send in the Virizion, expecting them to blind throw, and they do. So I can just let this go. It's just the Surf. They were expecting the Tyranitar to be brought back in, but no, it's the Virizion. I'm able to tank the double Surfs like it's nothing and exit with energy. Is my opponent going to send in the Dialga? Dialga does have energy, but it does not have a good matchup versus Virizion. Opponent sends in their final Pokemon, and it is Palkia. This game might be winnable. I fire off the neutral Leaf Blade. I now send in the Tyranitar. Palkia continues to farm. Palkia is going to be firing off an Aqua Tail, and here I make a game-losing mistake. I shield the Aqua Tail. What I should have done was just let the Aqua Tail go, but in my head, I was thinking that if I land a Brutal Swing, I can farm down. I'm going to be firing off this Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing will connect into the Dialga, and now it's going to be a race, and I throw another Brutal Swing. Again, I'm thinking that maybe I can farm down, but watch this. I get the Dialga to 1 HP, but they leave with the Draco Meteor loaded. No shields left for the Virizion, and we lose a heartbreaking game. Tyranitar sees an amazing lead in the next match as it leads into Heatran, and to my surprise, the Heatran is staying in. This tells me that somewhere in the back, they are going to be weak to the Tyranitar as well. Brutal Swing connects, that does quite a lot of damage, and this is the charge attack priority tied to the Stone Edge. Stone Edge is going to land. I'm going to get the full Smackdown farm down and lead with some energy. In comes Dialga. I bank the Brutal Swing, and I'm going to save switch into Genesect. Is it a Ho-Oh? What do they have back there? It's not another fire type, it's a Giratina origin, and by the opponent switching in the Giratina, this game is now over. I land the Techno Blast, I make it to the X-Scissor. X-Scissor will not KO here, but it's enough to grab the shield from the opponent. And I should be in a very comfortable position. They have to Shadow Ball if they want the KO, and they do. I can send in the Tyranitar and go for the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing will be lethal opponent, hoping that Dialga is going to be able to secure the win for them, but they were not expecting this. In comes the level 50 Virizion. Double kicks, super effective damage, and so will the Sacred Swords. I'm going to be shielding up everything they throw here, as I can tank a Draco Meteor from full health, but I've taken some chip damage, so I'm not going to risk it. I am going to double shield, and now I'm at the back-to-back Sacred Swords, and this game has concluded. Opponent lets the Sacred Sword through. Virizion gets the double kick down and takes the win. Shadow Tyranitar back to bad leads in the next match as it leads into Kyogre. I save switch into Genesect, but this is still not a winning matchup for Genesect, but at the very least, it's a type neutral one. I try and go for the X-Scissor one turn before they make it to the Surf, but I accidentally play to the CMP tie. That's definitely not ideal. I will commit a shield and return fire with the X-Scissor. X-Scissor connects. Opponent sends in Dialga, so they do have the Kyogre Dialga core that I'm looking for, but unfortunately, I'm down a shield, so this gets a bit tough. I'm able to land that Techno Blast. That is big. My opponent firing off energy, and I decide, you know what? I'm selling out for switch advantage. I'm going to double shield here. I'm farming up with the Genesect. Genesect going for the X-Scissor. Is my opponent going to shield, or are they going to let the Dialga go? X-Scissor will be no shielded. I get the Fury Cutter down, and I win switch advantage. Switch advantage is very big because Shadow Tyranitar Virizion core is very alignment dependent. Speaking of alignment, we now have it in the back. It's a Togekiss. And this is the battle of super effective damage. Charm versus Smackdown. I go for the Brutal Swing, and I think it is a CMP tie. This is what I needed. Brutal Swing gets shielded, the opponent plays to the CMP tie, and suddenly, against all odds, this game is winnable. I can send in Virizion, build up to the back-to-back Leaf Blades, and my opponent only has 1 shield remaining, and Togekiss took too much damage from the Tyranitar, so this Leaf Blade will be lethal. All that's left in the back is KYOGRE, and KYOGRE should be in Leaf Blade range. Back in comes KYOGRE. It's a CMP tie. How much energy do they have? Is it a Blizzard? It is not, just a Surf, and Virizion shakes off that damage like it's nothing. Leaf Blade knocks out KYOGRE, and that's a good game. Picking up a pretty good lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Giratina. My opponent is going to save switch into DIALGA, and unfortunately, again, I throw the smackdown before switching. But my opponent does me a bit of a favor here. They go for the Iron Head instead of building up to the Draco. If they build up to the Draco, then since I gave them enough of an energy lead, I can lose the zeros, but by going for the Iron Head, I'm now in a very good spot. I can land 1, farm up to the back-to-back, and they have the double shield if they want to make a play for switch. I fire off the Sacred Sword, opponent is going to let that through. They can send in the Giratina, and I'm going to go for the Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade, of course, going to do very minimal damage to the Giratina, as Giratina Altered in the Master League is very tanky. However, it doesn't really have a lot of damage output, so I'm not too worried about it. I can send in the Tyranitar, and we'll see what they have. They're firing off energy, perfectly fine by me. Dragon Claw, not worried about it whatsoever. In the back, it's another Togekiss. I send in the Genesect, and the opponent concedes the match. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into another Heatran, and the Heatran is staying in, so again, odds are they are going to be weak in the back. In that case, I decide to play differently this time. I'm going to protect the Tyranitar, and I am immediately punished as I shield a bait. That is so rough. I'm at the back-to-back Brutal Swings, however. Brutal Swing will be shielded. It's a CMP tie, and you bet Shadow Tyranitar is going to win it. Brutal Swing will secure the final shield from the opponent, and I now have a choice to make. Are they baiting? Are they nuking? They nuke. I shield. In comes a Shadow Lugia, and they are so weak to Tyranitar. I farm up to the Brutal Swing, and I play to the CMP tie. Brutal Swing, it's a Shadow Lugia. It barely does not KO. Lugia going to fire off the Sky Attack. Sky Attack into the Tyranitar. Tyranitar lives on 1, and it's a simultaneous KO. We know they have the very low health Heatran. I'm expecting they're going to send in their final Mon, so I send in the Genesect, and there it is. It's Rayquaza. Rayquaza not going to be able to make it to a Dragon Ascent. This is double super effective damage. Get Rayquaza out of here. In comes Virizion, and Heatran will be outpaced by Virizion. Only 9 turns to a Sacred Sword, and that will be game over for my opponent. I'm greeted with a nightmare lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Groudon. As I mentioned earlier, Groudon beats this entire team basically, so I am in so much trouble here. The only way I was able to beat one earlier was by calling 2 baits. May as well try it again, and they bait again. You've got to be kidding me. Groudons keep being overconfident, thinking T-Tar's shielding everything, and we are calling some baits, as that's our only hope to have a chance against this Groudon. I decide to shield. They have to Precipice Blades if they want to get the KO, and my shield is correct. That is massive. I'm firing off the Brutal Swing. Is my opponent going to double shield? They do double shield. Come on, just let the Brutal Swing go. From here, they're probably just going to go for the Fire Punch. I can survive the Fire Punch, however. I need to make it to the Brutal Swing. I get to the Brutal Swing, but the Mud Shot registers first. That is extremely unfortunate. My opponent does have back-to-back Fire Punches here. They go for Fire Punch number 1, and they try and go for the CMP tie, but I'm going to let that through. That is perfectly fine. Fire Punch will connect, and I'm going to go for the Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade, of course, massive overkill onto the Groudon, and we'll see what they have in the back. Oh no, it's Shadow Lugia. I'm going to send in the Genesect. Genesect farming up to the Technoblast. My opponent going for the Sky Attack. I have a call to make. Do I let this go? I decide to, and letting that move through loses me this game, as in comes DIALGA. This was a Groudon lead that was actually winnable if I shielded the move. It was a 50-50 call. I thought maybe they wouldn't have fast move pressure in the back, but they do. In comes DIALGA, and unfortunately, we lose that game. Hopping into the final match, and I see the Dream lead Shadow Tyranitar into Ho-Oh. Opponent save switches into Zekrom, and I'm going to respond with Genesect. And this time, I finally didn't throw the Smackdown. Instead, I waited for my opponent to switch, and then switched into the Genesect. My opponent is going to be able to fire off the Fusion Bolt here, and they're very close to a second, and they get there, outpacing me by a singular turn. And this is looking a bit tough. My opponent, are they going to shield? Are they going to call it? I decide to go for this. I'm expecting them to try and make a play for switch, but they let it go, and this is not good. My opponent can now just shield this and make a play for switch, and that would be awful for me, but they decide to let it go. They're saving shields for whatever they have in the back, and it's DIALGA. DIALGA looking for a farm down, but I make it to the Techno Blast, and this does quite a lot of neutral damage to DIALGA. DIALGA is going to commit the shield, and now I'm going to send in VIRIZION. VIRIZION farming up to the Sacred Sword. It's a CMP tie. This is the Draco Meteor. Come on, VIRIZION. Draco Meteor does not KO. VIRIZION withstands the damage. Let's go. I'm going to switch into Tyranitar. And now the question is, when does my opponent look to switch? They switch. In comes the Ho-Oh. The important thing here is that DIALGA did not leave with a move. So as long as I leave with energy here, which I do, when they send in the DIALGA, I can just click the Brutal Swing button, KO DIALGA, and take the win. All in all, I had a ton of fun getting to run this team and testing out my level 50 VIRIZION for the first time. With the team, I wanted to challenge myself to use 0 meta Pokemon, and I feel like that goal was accomplished. Genesect, Shadow Tyranitar, VIRIZION, none of them are even ranked in the top 40 on PvP for the Master League, and considering how tiny and condensed of a meta it is, I feel like that's a pretty cool accomplishment. I did some test battles in Go Battle League leading up to the main event, which was going to be streaming these sets live for Ultra League members. So we did a members only stream, and the results ended up pretty good. I went 11, 8, and 1 with the team. Definitely feel like there were a couple games that I left on the table that maybe if I played a little bit better, but overall just shy of a 60% win rate across the day, and using 3 Pokemon that aren't even in the top 40 in the Master League. When it comes to Master League VIRIZION, its typing is a really cool core breaker to the DIALGA KYOGRE core that is basically unbreakable outside of that. It's a core that you see quite frequently, and for good reason. It's really, really tough to beat. So in that regard, it does have some nice play. However, the drawback, of course, is going to be the stat product. The stat product only getting to 3400 CP, it gets outbulked by just about everything you're going to see, and outbulked by a heck of a lot. So it really relies on those type advantage matchups, and if you're in a matchup where you're even in a type neutral matchup, sometimes it can struggle just by virtue of that massive difference in stat product. So I'm very happy that I built it, and I'm very excited to get to use it in videos down the road. Definitely not a Pokemon that I'd recommend for climbing, but it's really fun to bring out if you're seeing way too many of those DIALGA plus whale cores. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to everyone for watching this season. This season of content has been an absolute blast, so thank you to everyone. If you're new, if you've been here since the start, I appreciate the heck out of you guys. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide helps me be able to make these daily videos. I have so much fun doing, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.